So just the other day I had the chance to save this PC from a bin. I didn't know much about the PC, I had no idea the specifications, but once I got it home and upon further inspection, it became a very strange story. So this right here is a custom PC that I've just saved from the bin, and it's well over a decade old, coming in with a build date of around 2008 from what I've been able to find out, but we'll touch more on this a bit later. So from the looks of it, well, it's a bit dirty, comes in a budget case from the late 2000s made by Cooler Master, and most interestingly of all, from what I've been able to pick up from just the outside, uses the wrong I/O shield and has some of the rear panels missing for the I/O, but generally, you know, doesn't look too bad. Although if you look very carefully, you can see a spider has long since died after taking up residence within this computer. So why don't we crack open this little fella's old home and see what's going on inside. So with that side of the case off, well, it's not looking all too happy inside. First impressions include that the power supply unit is alright, that hit me and that was something nice to see, but there is a spaghetti mess of cables coming out of it. Virtually anything that remotely resembles a PC part is caked in dust and, you know, whatever else there was, with some of the worst places being on the fans. There's a few cobwebs, the remains of whatever else could have possibly been once living in this thing. Oh, and IDE cables. Yes, we're dealing with some IDE level equipment here. But actually, before we can do anything, we want to see what is at the heart of this beast. I mean, if it is a beast, we don't know yet, and if it was actually worth saving. So let's get these parts out and see what we've got at the heart of this little computer. So let's start with the processor real quick, and it's not bad. In fact, it's a CPU that we've used before on the channel, and I know it's not all too terrible. At least it's not that bad. It's a Core2Quad Q8200 and it's a few years old. Well, it's more than a few years old, it's about a decade old at this point. It's a quad core, it struggles in modern titles, and unlike the Q6600, it does tend to be a little bit better on power, although lacks when it comes to actual overclocking and, you know, performance. Then again, as I said, it is 11 years old, so you know, not terrible to find inside a computer. At least we have 4 cores. Then, this is where it gets a bit strange. For such a decent CPU of the era, we have it paired with a graphics card that's renowned for being, well, a bit of a potato. And that is the Radeon HD 3450. So we can see where we stand with what this PC was used for, as this card made for a perfectly fine display adapter, so we can guess this PC was made for desktop usage. And it makes sense, you know, it's the modern day equivalent of getting a Core i7 and pairing it with a GT 1030 as a display adapter, something people do even today when they only want the processing power. Other than this, it's about your standard affair for a system of its age. It's got 4GB of DDR2 800MHz RAM, which is a healthy amount for the age of the system, and nice when it comes to multitasking, at least it would have back when 4GB was seen as quite a lot to have, a bog standard 500GB SATA hard drive, and the weirdest part of all, and this is the really weird part that makes me question why they've got such a weak graphics card in the system, is the overkill Cooler Master power supply, which is just the start of the weird designs. See, we can see this PC must have been custom built, likely by a local company. It's been QC tested, but it doesn't seem like a professional job. And I'm just going to touch on a few areas that, you know, I picked up on. Not that I'm a professional myself, but still, I like to think that I do a better job than this most of the time. There was a random assortment of screws used to hold the motherboard in the case. There was no attempt at cable management, you know, a few cable ties here or there would have gone down a treat. The DVD drive wasn't properly secured down, it was only secured from the front-facing side. So yeah, there's definitely a strange set of issues all round. Still, I doubt you actually came here to hear me ridicule someone using the wrong screws on a PC. The wrong I/O shield. And a strong combination of parts that make utterly no sense in the real world. We want to see if this PC can be saved. And if saved, I mean what it can actually do. And if we can clean it up, and if we can actually get it all put back together normally. So it turns out the PC does in fact work, and luckily for us it actually comes with quite a few accessories, which is a bonus as we were never meant to have a screen, but we do in fact have one, and a keyboard, which we know was quite likely authentically used with this system, so it all adds up. We're essentially using the system as it was used its entire life. We're going to be testing this PC primarily with Windows 10, but before you go ahead and leave an angry comment that you've just typed up about how I'm not using Linux and how Linux will save this PC and all that, we will also be testing with Windows 7 and of course Linux. So do not worry, you'll see those results too. Not that there was all too much difference on show, but anywho, how exactly does a PC saved from the bin stack up? So for your general web browsing tasks, it's actually an A1 system still, albeit Windows 10 can be a tad sluggish in some areas. Then again, on all three operating systems, it was a bit sluggish, you know, it's an older system. Still, I didn't have any issues getting it up to date with any modern tasks you'd get up to on a day-to-day system like this, and given it was packed full of RAM, at least for 2008 standards, and it has a semi-decent quad-core processor, it can cope with most forms of multitasking. In fact, I got it running videos at one point while I was doing a load of work on it. Now don't get me wrong, you are not going to be doing any 1080p playback on this. 720p was just about doable with H.264ify, given the graphics card can't really decode modern codecs, but anything older, you know, it does alright with. After that though, you know, it worked alright. Still, as we've learnt time and time again, there isn't much reason to keep around an entire PC setup like this when your phone actually does a better job while taking up far less room and usually doing the job better. But anyway, we want to see what this can run, something a bit more intensive that you can't really do on a mobile. So just before we jump straight into things, I did overclock the system. Now I know what you're thinking, this is going to be some sort of mental montage of me getting the best performance out of it, but no. The CPU didn't budge at all really, as the board doesn't allow any type of real overclocking. All you can really do is set it to performance mode and lock it to the highest multiplier, which helps a little bit but not all too much. GPU wise, we got lucky. We got very lucky. Now considering this graphics card is a potato, we were able to max out the sliders and MSI afterburner for both core clocks and memory clocks. However, going any further than this would cause stability issues, and I didn't really fancy messing about with voltages, especially on a card like this where, really, you know, we're only going to be seeing a few more FPS from this type of overclock anyway. But still, every little helps with a system like this. So why don't we hop straight into things? So let's throw ourselves in at the deep end, and can this PC run Crysis? Well, depressingly, the game does actually run on this strange custom-built PC, and it powers through it just enough to get a respectable average of 35 FPS, all the while being somewhat okay to play. Now, I mean, the frame rate could definitely tank at times, hence the 1% lows. But overall, it's not a bad showing from the PC as a starting point. We were very graphically limited though, and the game looked utterly horrible, and our CPU utilization, well, it only ever shot up when, you know, something physics-based was going on. Other than that, it was never really utilized. We were just pegged at 100% on the graphics card. But still, Crysis does in fact work. As for a somewhat intensive RPG that'll actually run on this PC, we have Oblivion with a slightly higher resolution this time than what I ran Crysis at, however still with those same lower settings. Not that this is the prettiest game in existence in 2019, as this was the main way to get the game running on the system. Overall though, you know, it ran alright with the decent average FPS. I could even hit 60 FPS when you were just exploring, however combat would hurt the FPS just a tad. I mean, the game was still fully playable, and you could definitely get away with playing it on this system. Now, we're moving into the modern era a tad here with Csgo, which would probably have ran okay if we were running the actual 2012 version, however a lot's changed in 7 years since its debut to the PC market. So even with a relatively low resolution and the lowest possible settings you can get in-game, we saw a mediocre experience at best. It was far from competitive, hovering around the mid-30 FPS region, and for a slower paced game, you know, that's fully acceptable, you can play that. But you know, the game would tank quite heavily when there was a lot going on screen, which there can be in a few game modes. I wouldn't say it's unplayable, but it's not going to be a fun experience. However, this is about where you get most people stop testing these PCs and they think, oh well, it couldn't run CSGO, but no, we don't stop there, no. We decide to test the beautifully optimized GTA 5, and once again, This is where one of our issues was. Even in 240p, that's right, 240p, the same resolution as the N64, with no shadows, we saw 20 FPS. All because of that graphics card, and I'm not even going to say it was pegged at 100%, because the drivers for it are so bad that it never saw 100% utilization. You know, you need modded drivers on a card this old, at least an AMD card this old, to get it to run GTA 5 properly. I'm pretty sure I've done a video on this. But either way, you get the idea. A modern title like this is just nothing. You know, it can't run on this PC well. Still, it seems that for a lot of those older titles, for example Mount & Blade Warband, you can crank up those settings and the resolutions, and they all run absolutely fine. Mount & Blade Warband here stayed well above 40 FPS for a lot of the time, nearing in on 60 FPS for most of our gameplay. However, the intensive benchmark I usually opt for here shows that it can struggle in certain instances and can even hit the CPU quite hard with the amount of people on screen. Then again, you know, we're still limited by that graphics card. I will say that this isn't a usual test for me with Just Cause 2, and it's not because I knew it wouldn't be playable, no, it's because I'm actually surprised how close it was to playable. In certain instances it was playable, but that was when there was nothing going on. You know, this is a game where there is always a lot going on. We saw 26 FPS on average, and I was actually surprised, you know. It ran somewhat better than I was expecting. Still not playable, but you know, better than I expected. Simpler, modern titles, mostly things like City Builders, will be absolutely fine as long as you use lower settings. I mean, I chose to use Banish here, which is a classic title, and honestly, it was a bit more CPU intensive than some of the games I've tested, but it was nice to actually see a system running and actually taxing the CPU a little bit, especially considering how GPU limited we've been here. You know, it's a game that doesn't need to look pretty, and all of these newer games will just be simple games that will run on anything that can actually display a bloody monitor, but still it ran alright. And to finally round us off with, we have the best gaming test of all, well, the best is in the most playable, with the latest version of Minecraft with Optifine running, and of course an extremely low resolution of 800 by 600 with a mixture of fast and fancy settings. But the game looked alright, provided, you know, looked alright means it looks like Minecraft, and it really showed that it's just a balancing act between CPU and GPU, because it's such a painful and pitiful graphics card, but if you tweak the settings right, you can try and get a balance between smooth frame rates on the CPU side, and just enough graphical fidelity to make it so you can actually see what you're doing. As for 3D Mark, I'd like to say it offered some sort of real-world comparison here that showed us just how this PC compares to a modern one, but unfortunately there isn't much of a way to show that considering I haven't tested many DirectX 10 limited systems. But what I can tell you is that it shows us what we already knew, that this system is majorly held back by its potato of a graphics card. Which is saying something, as I actually said people shouldn't buy this CPU and should buy something 1155 based, which, you know, isn't always like a budget orientated channel to say that, but it's true. Then again, you know, when you're bottlenecking a Core2Quad in 2019, it's really time to consider replacing that graphics card, which really could help this little system out. But hey, you know, it's a PC from the bin, I'm surprised it worked, I'm surprised it could actually show anything, and I'm surprised we were able to breathe a little bit of life back into this thing. So it was nice to actually get it on the go. It's worth noting that off the script I was able to do a few OBS recordings on the machine. You know, it's not an uncapable machine from what we've seen. It does everything, just it does it at such a bog standard office level that you'd expect. You know, the recording's nothing crisp and the gameplay could suffer at times because of it, even on older titles, but overall, you know, I was still kind of impressed it was able to do things like this. So in conclusion, there you have it. That is actually all I can say about this one. I mean, even benchmarking across 3 different operating systems. That's right, I tested this across 3 different operating systems, and we saw virtually nothing in the way of differences, other than the fact you can hardly launch GTA 5 on Linux. So I'm trying to think of something to dwell on, but all I've really got is 1, the fact that Spider used to live in this, and it can now play Crysis. Or 2, the fact that whoever built this must have borrowed their skill set from Stevie Wonder. Genuinely, this is not a very well built PC, but it's somewhat okay now that I've put it back together. In all seriousness though, it's just a boring computer all round. It's a bog standard office computer that someone threw together and probably sold to someone. You know, and even then, it did its office work fine, so they never noticed it was poorly built. Honestly, that might even work out as the video title. So you saw it here first. We saved possibly the most boring and poorly built PC from a bin and got it working. And, you know, we're a little bit surprised that it was still boring when it was working. So just maybe we should spice it up a bit. But what I'm saying will have to be a story for another video. Hope this video has helped maybe some of you. If you wanted to save an old office PC or wondering what it could actually do, you know, donate it to an old family member. You know, they're still perfectly capable of doing a load of your office work. The only thing they seem to struggle with is running anything. In which case, that's something we could look at improving in the future. But I hope this video has been useful to those of you who might want to do that. Thank you very much for watching. Good night. So there you go, possibly the most boring PC in existence, and it took me a long time to benchmark this across 3 operating systems. So if you enjoyed this, you can always like and subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one.